So, yeah. So welcome to the second talk of today's Keio ICU Linguistics Colloquium. I'm happy to introduce you to Jianjing Kuang, an Associate Professor of Linguistics at University of Pennsylvania. Jianjing works mostly on phonetics and laboratory phonology, and she investigates how phonological contrasts are structured in a phonetic space, and her projects explore multidimensional cues in tone processing or glottal articulation and mapping between production and perception. She also works in the field with speakers, and she has worked on languages such as Yi, Hani, and Bo, all of them Tibeto-Burman, Black Miao, Hmong Mien language, and a Mayan language, Kwanzabal, and Yoruba from Nigeria. Today, Jianjing will talk about tone acquisition beyond F0. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for the very kind introduction, and thank you for having me today. So let me first try to share my screen. Okay, bear with me for a second. Let me switch to the do you guys see like the full screen of slides?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. So yeah, I'm very happy to share some of my recent work on in the same topic, tone processing beyond F0, and this time focus on the acquisition problem. So before we get to the acquisition, let's from very beginning think about tone first. So if we ever take ICULINC 101, the first thing we learn about tone is the classical definition, which is if a language has a lexical tonal contrast, which means the language uses distinctive pitch patterns to distinguish word meaning. And we also introduce Charles number or IPA transcription for tone. And in that system, basically tone is a scalar pitch system like this. Yuan Chao was basically inspired by musical scale and invented this pitch scale for tonal transcription. So just like a music scale, so the low pitch will be like do and the high pitch will be so, something like that. So from low to high will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And of course, he also proposed a language can maximally have 5-level tone contrast. But anyway, so this type of tonal system, assuming that tone is a monodimensional phonetic dimension. So this has been the classical view for decades. And in my dissertation work, I basically, many years ago already now, tried to challenge this view and talk about tone dispersion. So one argument I really want to make at that time is, so tonal contrast, just as other phonetic dimensions, not exempt from the general principle, which is a good dispersion of the phonemic inventory, supposed to follow the principle, which is to be easy to produce and also easy to perceive. So, so that's true for like vowel space, consonant space, and tonal space is the same. So if we think about how the limitation in the production and perception, we can see that multi-level F0 contrast is actually very hard to produce and perceive. So in terms of production, we actually only use very limited F0 range for speech. So everybody can sing more than 5 notes, but we have no language on the earth are known to have more than 5-level tone contrast. And the pitch range for F0 range for speech is only about 100 to 150 hertz, no matter it's tonal language or non-tonal language. So yeah, so not everybody can sing, but certainly everybody with normal function vocal production would be able to speak. On the other hand, we need to have sufficient absolute difference in order to have reliable perception. And there's also minimum requirement for that for lexical contrast. So that's like 9 hertz. We can do a very simple math and understand. So it's very difficult to have multi-level contrast. Even for 5-level tone, it's extremely hard. So for majority language, so 5-level tone language is extremely rare. So there's other more effective strategy to increase tonal inventory without like challenging the limits of production and perception, which is to introduce additional dimensions. So it's very common among tonal language, especially for the like Eastern Asian tonal languages have a lot of inventories and have a lot of contour tones. So this way, so a single tone actually have shape or multiple absolute targets that can introduce additional dimension to the tonal space. And another strategy will be involve additional cues other than pitch. So if we think about the voice source, actually F0 or the rate of vocal fold vibration, only one aspect of that. There are also rich aspect about the shape and the mode of vocal fold vibration. So as known as voice quality in the auditory term sort of. So there are many articulatory aspects related to voice quality. So for example, the degree of glottal constriction is very important. Usually quantifies open quotient or contact quotient, and also show difference in spectral tilt. And generally speaking, the language, the phonation type of voice quality has relatively more constricted glottis than will have flatter spectral tilt. And the phonation has relatively less constricted glottis, we have more tilted spectral tilt. And also the abruptness of contact is also an important aspect of voice quality and showing the symmetry of the glottal pulses. So whether you have very slam-like contact or very gradual kind of smooth contact, that's also have very significant effect in acoustics, also perceptually salient. And also like periodicity or noise ratio, also very important. So yeah, so what I'm saying here is there's very rich dimensionality in the voice source in addition to F0. So when we look at that, and we can actually see they play a very important role in tone production and perception. So come back to the very extreme case where like the most famous 5-level tone language on earth, because it's often cited in the textbook. So black male has 5-level tone contrast. So I conducted a few experimental field work with black male native speakers and try to understand how they produce and perceive the 5-level tone. So yeah, so when I plot the F0 trajectory of the 5-level tones, and first of all, we sort of can confirm that indeed there's 5 different F0 levels. So if you want to count, like transcribe them as 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, that's correct. But we also immediately notice that the 3 midtones, 2, 2, 3, 3, and 4, 4 are kind of in trouble, especially 3, 3 is kind of in a very cross space between 2, 2, and 4, 4. It's kind of very confusable, perhaps. However, when we actually did the perception experiment, so measuring this similarity matrix from the perception experiment, and then use multidimensional scaling to plot the perceptual space. So this is the relative distance for the 5-level tone here. As we can see, 3, 3 actually well distinguished from 2, 2, and 4, 4. It's not confused at all. And actually, yeah, so among the best recognized category, only 2, 2, and 4, 4 are kind of the most confusable category among the 5-level tone. So 3, 3 is not in trouble, and 5, 5, and 1, 1 also definitely not in trouble. Then I tried to use computational modeling to understand what cue contribute to this like perceptual distinction. So I I developed 2 models, tested 2 different hypotheses. So the first hypothesis is assuming only F0 cues are involved So I generously also involved all the F0 Q, including like the pitch range change, slope, and so on. But anyhow, for the 5-level tone case, we can see 3/3 and 2/2 and all the midtones just very crowded together, just as we kind of predicted from the pure F0 trajectory plot. So this is nothing looks like the actual perceptual space we gather from a human listener. So then we test the alternative hypothesis, which is combining, including all the voice source cues. And then we have both pitch cues and also voice quality cues together. Now we can see 3/3 is well distinguished from other midtones, and 5/5 and 1/1 are also even better distinguished. So generally this tonal space is actually well dispersed. And this space is very similar, has a great match with the perceptual space. Yeah, so this is basically support that actually for Black male speakers, both pitch and phonation are involved in the tonal space. So here is the comparison between the perceptual space and the production space. And after a careful measurement of acoustic measures as well as arterial measures, I found that actually the 5-level tones actually produce with different phonation types. So the 3/3 actually is much breathier compared to 2/2 and 4/4. And the 5/5 actually has relatively constricted glottis, but has very high periodicity, so it's a tense voice. And 1/1 has this like irregularity and pulse variation, and also greater glottal constriction. So that's the vocal fry phonation. So we can see the 5 levels actually organized in a multidimensional space with both pitch cues and the phonation cues are involved. So based on this previous study, we tested 2 hypotheses: the pure pitch tone model and like the multidimensional tone model with both pitch cues and the phonation cues. And I think the case safely reject this kind of monodimensional assumption. So tonal contrast are certainly not monodimensional. It at least include both pitch and phonation cues. To organize the phonation, organize the tonal contrast. And this is certainly not like the exceptional cases. It's actually very commonly found among tonal languages. And in fact, I'm not showing here. So a simple typological study will show that the language have more tonal inventory, actually more likely to have voice quality as one of the cue. So here I just listed a number of studies, and thanks to the recent development of the technology, a fast-growing number of studies, including the contributions of the colleagues here, have shown that voice quality is a very important cue in tonal contrast. So in my tone model, I actually involved 2 different kind of phonation continuum. So the first type, I call that pitch independent phonation. So in this type of voice quality continuum, because the muscle control for phonation, the mode and shape of vocal fold, can be relatively independent from the muscle control for F0 variation. So the phonation contrast can be relatively independent from pitch production in certain pitch range. So language are able to produce different phonation type with fairly constant F0. So this figure is basically proposed long time ago by Peter Leffelgood. So voicing is a continuum from most open, like, and most close as glottal stop. So you have default as modal. If you have more constricted glottis, then you have something like creaky voice. And if you have more open glottis, then you have breathy voice. So this continuum happening like in the middle range of the the tonal model. So in the case here, like the three middle tones actually organized in two registers here. So basically, in this case, the pitch-independent phonation can function as the distinctive cue for the tonal contrast. So other related language like white Hmong, green Hmong, or Hmong language in general typically have one tonal category, just with phonation as the primary cue. So if you change pitch, actually the contour doesn't really matter so much. But if you get rid of the phonation cue, and listener will since you're seriously in trouble. And also, this type of phonation contrast tonal feature is very common among Tibeto-Burman languages, where this language family typically have like tonal register, which is mostly based on phonation, maybe bundled with other cues as well. So this is the case on Southern E, which have been working on for many years, have 5 tones. And we can see they have 2 level tones and 2 low tones. But the 2 level tones are 2 mid tone and 2 low tones. And they have very similar pitch contour. So between the mid L and the mid T, so the crucial primary cue for these 2 tones are phonation difference. So there's register contrast for the mid tone and the low tone. So similarly, in completely unrelated language family like Mazatec, where you can have like 9 tones divided by 3 register. Yes, like each high tone has 3 phonation, mid tone has 3 phonation, and low tone has 3 phonation. But there's also another type of phonation continuum, which I call it a pitch-dependent phonation continuum. In this situation, so phonation actually covary with pitch scale. So you can, if you're a singer, you can actually think about the way when you sing. So when you sing in a very low pitch, you then tend to produce something like a very low pitch. That's a vocal fry. And when you produce sing something in the middle range, and you will have very comfortable modal voice. But when you sing or speak at a very high pitch towards the upper bound of your chest register, then you will produce a tense voice. You'll feel a lot of tension in your vocal fold. And finally, so when you speak in very high note or screaming, sometimes you have to use falsetto. So in this scenario, basically, so this kind of continuum had been studied a lot in the singing literature, but haven't talked about so much in the speech literature. So basically, phonation is covarying with pitch, and different pitch actually will produce with different phonation. And then naturally, the lowest tone will likely to associate with creaky voice or vocal fry, and the highest pitch or highest tone likely to associate with a tense voice. And these cues can be very helpful. They can be the enhancement cue for pitch target and tonal target. So this is not just like physiological covariation, and this pitch-dependent voice quality cues are also perceptually salient. So over the years, I've done quite a few studies, psychoacoustic study, try to understand whether those cues also interact in the when those cues can facilitate pitch perception. So indeed, I found tense voice tend to sound higher in pitch. By contrast, vocal fry tend to sound lower in pitch. So indeed, the pitch-dependent voice quality can be a very effective indicator for the intended pitch range, and can be very useful for stuff like speech normalization. And there's also a study showing that voice quality cues are definitely integrated in tone perception. So a relatively well-studied case, such as vocal fry, are shown to facilitate low tone perception in both Mandarin and Cantonese. So today, the case I want to focus on is Mandarin. So Mandarin is very famous for the allophonic creaky voice in tone 3, which is the lowest tone in this language. So Mandarin tone 3 can be produced with either creaky voice or non-creaky voice. So it's allophonic. So it can produce something like ma, very creaky. Or if you raise your pitch, ma, you can, yeah, my voice now is kind of tired. But yeah, it's possible to produce a non-creaky version as I shown here. So we don't see any interruption in the pitch tracking. So in my previous study, I also showed that, so this covariation is not just limited to tone 3. You would see similar general covariation between F0 and voice quality cues for all the tones. So yeah, for example, if we ask people to produce the tonal contrast in different conditions, like high pitch condition, normal pitch condition, low pitch condition, we can see the range significantly changed. And then the voice quality also significantly changed over different conditions. So for example, this is tone 1 will be much tenser in the case of high pitched condition and will be breathier in the case, or laxer in the case of low pitch condition. And also importantly, we can see the voice quality cues actually have distinctive pattern for different tones. And also there is a covariation relationship between a very nicely covariate relationship between voice quality cue and F0, just is not linear. So yeah, so the middle range, if you produce higher pitch or lower pitch, you actually have a slightly gradual change in voice quality. And when they reach the lowest point, as it suggests here, so you will have split. So the lowest pitch has been produced either by a breathier voice or creaky voice. You just cannot just maintain the same type. And also importantly, yeah, even though voice quality for language like Mandarin is completely allophonic and optional, but it's actually sufficient in tone recognition. So here there's three studies showing that. So for human listeners, if you neutralize F0s, and people can somehow still do quite reliable tone recognition. And whisper speech where there's no F0 cues and only spectral cues, and people can relatively reliably distinguish tonal category. And for ASR, like for machine, the spectral cues actually sufficient, arguably even better for tone recognition. So it's kind of surprising, but yeah, it's interesting. So voice quality cues actually sufficient in tone recognition, even for the language have allophonic voice quality cues. So I hope by now I have really fully convinced you that the voice quality cues are very important for tone production and perception. So now the present question is, how do kids get here? Importantly, I'm interested, do they have to learn to integrate the voice quality cues? So I have two hypotheses. If they integrate this covariant cues from very early on or very beginning, they maybe suggest they don't have to learn. So the covariation just hardwired in our physiological system and even in the auditory system. So we learn to produce and integrate the cue in both production and perception. Another alternative hypothesis will be if the cue integration actually have a developmental curve. So it's possible that the kids have to learn the strategy during language development. So there has been some Mandarin tone acquisition study on Mandarin. So in both production and perception. In terms of production, so study have shown that so by time of very early, like age 3, kids are capable of producing contrastive tones, but it's not reaching to an adult level until later. And the perception-wise, yes, kids can perceive lexical tone as early as like 4 months, but this kind of stretching until like age 7, they are not perfectly in perception. But anyhow, so all of the study are predominantly focused on F0 only, so nothing showing about other important cues other covariant cues in tonal contrast. And of course, they also have very limited age group, range. So all the study have been looking at kids under age of 7. So in this joint work with my graduate student and Professor Ultra Chen from Utrecht University, so we look at also try to provide the first answer to those questions. When do children reach adult level tonal contrast in Mandarin? And when do children learn to integrate, if they have to learn, integrate other useful cues beyond F0 in tone production? So this is the corpus analysis. So the corpus was collected by Yang and Chen in 2018. It's a semi-spontaneous corpus. So basically the kids produce 160 SVO, very short SVO sentences elicited in a picture naming game. And we have 4 or 5 age of, actually, we also have 5 age groups now, but yeah, at the time of analysis, we have 4 age groups, and each age group have 10 to 12 native speakers. And yeah, we force aligned the recording and extracted a number of acoustic measures, including both F0 cues and spectral cues related to voice quality. Yeah, so if you're interested in the measures, you can ask me. Yeah, so all the measurements are normalized per speaker. And we did computational modeling and 2 types of computational modeling. The first type is doing the multidimensional scaling, try to calculate and visualize the high dimensional phonetic space for tonal contrast, similar to the Black Meow study, and also try to calculate the separability in terms of within category variation and across category variation. And the second modeling, second type of modeling, will try to cross-validate the result from the MDS analysis with multiple machine learning classification method, try to model the accuracy of the tone recognition and how useful of different cue sets to the accuracy of tone recognition. So we include linear-based classification, also nonlinear-based, also state-of-art, 3 types of machine learning classification. So the results are here. So we compared F0 only cue and voice quality cue, and also the combination of those 2 types of cues. So firstly, we can look at F0. So we can immediately see there's already a very decent separability for age 4 and 5 already, the youngest group. But we still see kind of further development for age 7 and 8. And actually, 7 and 8 reaches the maximum contrastability even better than adults. Yeah, so actually we found this kind of overshooting production for kids. So the simple story is that so kids already pretty good at age 5 for F0 cues, and we don't see further development after 7 and 8. But for voice quality cues, we see very dramatic developmental pattern. So we can see for 4 and 5 age group, and yeah, basically there's nothing very clear. And by the time of 7, 8, there's a substantial improvement, but still is not very well separated. And 10 to 11, we can see the separability is continue to improve, and the cluster become tighter and tighter. And finally, for adults, voice quality cue itself will be sufficient to distinguish tonal category. So if we combine those 2 cues together, so it just like further reinforce the pattern we see from voice quality cue. So there's actually a developmental curve in terms of tone separability, and there's a very important substantial improvement between age 4 to 5 and age 7 to 8. And if we will validate this, use tone classification accuracy measures, so comparing LDA, random forest, and SVM, both linear and nonlinear classification. So we can see they actually have the similar result and also very consistent across different methodology. So we're very confident. So what we see from the previous figures, not artifact from computational modeling, is actually a very robust pattern. So we see F0 cues actually, dramatically improve. All the cues actually dramatically improves between age 4 to 5 and age 7, 8. So this is a very critical period of time for language development. And after that, the curve becomes flatter. But importantly, you can see the red line, which is F0, actually kind of decrease for the older kids and adults. But the cue, the blue line for spectral cue or the voice quality cue, actually continue to improve. Also, the tone classification test here replicate the previous study showing that actually for adults and older kids, spectral cues are actually sufficient to distinguish tonal category. So to summarize, the voice quality cues become increasingly important in tonal classification during language development. And F0 cues are fully developed earlier, but voice quality cues continue to develop throughout childhood and into adulthood. And what that implied to our tone acquisition. So as we see tone production perception evolve rich information, it's actually indeed important to examine cue beyond F0 for tone acquisition. And regarding to whether they have to learn or not, we see there's a very clear developmental curve for the cue integration. So we think it's unlikely that the cue integration purely due to a physiological coupling, but it's more likely to be at least partially learned by those kids. And generally speaking, older kids and adults has a more integrated strategy in tone production and also perception. That's something we hope to do that recently. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. If you have questions or comments, please send me your name and affiliation. I have some clarification question. You showed like around 7 and 8 and to 10 and 11, there's this change in terms of the, this is a production data, right?
Yeah, just production.
Right.
You haven't done any perception yet. Yeah.
Yes. But I was wondering why that age? Do you think there's some kind of physiological changes in the control of the vocal fold that it becomes more fine-tuned at that age, and that's perhaps why they do it, or they simply, it's just, it can be like, it's a late developmental stage as we've seen, but I was wondering why around that point? Like, is there anything that happens in there, or do you have any thoughts about whether the articulatory setup is changing, or whether they perceive it better? Like F0 was salient in the beginning, but then they realize, oh, okay, I need to pay attention to other things as well.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, that's a very good question. I think the modal control definitely better fine-tuned during the time like 5 to 6. So not just the tone production, just generally speaking, articulately like R and L production, for example, also showing that kids have problem producing R and L product like contrast. But by time of 5 and 6, that's actually a critical period of time, and the modal control be fine-tuned. Also, a study showing like auditory discrimination ability also kind of improved. So yeah, the musicality also showed a dramatic increase. So basically the sensitivity to small phonetic difference definitely improved. So yeah, so that's why we don't rule out the possibility that kids definitely, yeah, there's like a physiological development component involved, but we don't think that's the only reason why we see this very dramatic, dramatic kind of developmental curve. And certainly they also kind of perceptually learned this is kind of useful and also integrate that in their production.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Next question comes from Shigeto Kawahara, Keio University.
Thank you. This was a great talk. My question is really general. So when we think about other contrasts, like a voicing contrast is also multidimensional, right? Like the vibration as well as F0 and F1, also aspiration contrast. But do we see the same kind of multidimensionality in superlaryngeal contrast? And if not, why?
Oh, can you repeat the second part for laryngeal?
For laryngeal contrast, like place contrast, maybe it's multidimensional in the sense that it's cued by burst energy as well as phoneme transition, but that's just physical consequence of the constriction in the vocal tract. And it's not like speakers are adding an additional layer of cues, right?
Yeah, so
yeah,
I guess I can try to answer the question if I understand correctly. So I think recently, I think one kind of big gap in the acquisition literature is really like addressing how the cue integration is happening. So we kind of sometimes assuming because that's so natural physiologically, maybe it's always there. And we kind of this one kind of striking finding here is actually it's actually not always there, or at least not always like this. And also, yeah, previously I supervised a dissertation looking at like the Korean three-way stops among very young kids from age 1 to 3. So what the student found was actually from very beginning, they use VOT mostly. And then somehow by time of age 3, they learn to use F0 cue, like predominantly for Lannis and aspirated. So that's kind of more effective contrast, of course, we know for adult speaker. But yeah, so the important thing is we see like dimensionality change for tone, for like language acquisition. The category actually like more integrative over time. So I think we see we have a bit more evidence now. I think like cue integration. So yeah, I guess partially just the like more experienced speaker will learn to integrate more cues, so you can sort of more resistant to different contextual variation and more efficient in production as well. Okay. Yeah, so they just learn to be smarter.
So do you know any work that shows the same kind of multidimensionality in contrast that are made in the vocal tract, not in the larynx? So the Korean three-way contrast is also about here.
Laryngeal.
Right? Here.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think. Do you have like an example in mind when you say vocal tract? It means like vowel contrast?
Vowel contrast or nasality contrast, place contrast.
Yeah, so I guess there's no study showing that. So for example, like phoneme transition cues always there, or like what would be the like initial status for the cue. So generally, I think, yeah, I think it's not clear. And also relatively there's very few production data from production studies from kids. And the only thing I can recall is like the study about like R and L, as I said, actually not really adult-like, and they will use different things. Of course, perception will be different. They maybe perceive some cue first and then later figure out there's other more effective strategy to use. But yeah, again, I think that's like cue integration in language development is kind of a general problem which hasn't been really addressed.
Yeah, R is an interesting example. Well, thank you.
Thank you. The next question comes from Toshio Matsuura from Hokusei Gakuin University.
Hi, nice to meet you. Thank you for
Thank you.
interesting talk. I have a question about the contrast between tonal language and the so-called pitch accent language. The languages you given in slide 13 is many of language in this slide is so-called tone language or monosyllabic tone language. So how do you think about pitch accent language such as Japanese, Swedish, or some kind of Bantu languages?
Yeah, so that's very interesting question. So definitely, I think, yeah, so here in this talk, I've been carefully say that lexical tonal contrast also kind of with kind of a classical definition will be assuming like syllabic level of contrast. Yeah. And I think the pitch accent level could be different. So far we don't have data for Japanese, so maybe, yeah, you guys can help me and we can collaborate and try to figure out what's really going on. So I think just simply no data, I think it could be different. So even among the so-called tonal language, so between Mandarin and Thai, so the Q integration pattern actually different from each other. So we believe the phonological knowledge also important, but also further support the idea. So Q integration is not necessarily something completely taken for granted. You actually have to learn and develop over time. And pitch accent in general, yeah, so based on the general knowledge, is pitch accent generally is more F0 related. Of course, I think in general, people haven't really looking at whether voice quality is really helpful for pitch accent production perception. So I don't have a clear answer to that. I'm not a native speaker, not a speaker of Japanese. So, but I think that's a good question. I don't think pitch accent will necessarily the same. So we're also right now looking at like sentence level intonation for Mandarin, and we don't found the same integration pattern, so which suggests the prosodic structure matters. And so I'll be interested to look into that question.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. So we will wrap up the session and then continue the discussion forward. Let's thank Jianjing one more time. Thank you so much for sharing your work. I would like to thank the assistant Migiwa, and I also thank the co-host Shigeto Kawahara. This event was supported by the Institute of Cultural and Linguistic Studies at Keio University and the Linguistic Lab at International Christian University. There's some announcement. The second season of the Keio ICU Linguistic Colloquium is completed as of today. And we are planning to have a third season in January and February, just 2 days towards then. So please stay tuned. I would also like to make an announcement about the prosody series that's going on in ICU Linguistic Colloquium on December 5th. Saturday, that's next week, from 10 a.m. We have 2 speakers, Emily Alfner from York University in Canada and Natalie Weber from Yale University will share the research. Thank you all who participated in today's colloquium, and we hope to see you in our next talks. The recording will now be stopped.